Okay, this is Steve Zeltzer. I'm with the Bay Area Free Julian Assange Action Committee, and we're having this press conference today to call for the KPFA local station board to change its position and actually call for the defense of freedom of Julian Assange. The Pacifica National Board has voted by 12-0 to support Julian Assange, to call for the freedom and defense of him. It's been supported by Daniel Healdsburg and many other people. Oliver Stone, Ken Loach, many other people have called for the freedom of Julian Assange. Why should he be defended? He should be defended because he and WikiLeaks, which he established, have exposed crimes of the U.S. government, crimes of corporations, crimes of politicians against the American people and against the people of the world. And that is the reason the U.S. government has indicted him and wants to arrest him and will basically put him away. They want this to be a warning to all journalists, all whistleblowers. You better not tell the truth. You better not really speak out about these crimes. And American people really have a right to know what their government is doing, and a right to know what Congress is doing, what the politicians are doing, and what the billionaires are doing. We have a threat to democracy, and both the Democrats and Republicans are united in attacking Julian Assange. Why is that? The reason they're united is they're both implicated in these crimes. Hillary Clinton was involved in supporting the overthrow, the criminal overthrow of the Honduran government and establishing a military government in Honduras. That was a crime against the Honduran people. It's one of the reasons tens of thousands of Hondurans have been forced to leave Honduras is precisely because of that military dictatorship. Hillary Clinton was also involved in coercing Bulgaria and Eastern European governments at the behest of Chevron to allow fracking. Now, do we need more fracking in Eastern Europe? Why is Hillary Clinton, and why was Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State pressurizing and coercing these Eastern European countries to have fracking? Because she represents Chevron. And yet there are people who think she's an environmentalist. One of the most compelling reasons that the Democrats are so angry at Julian Assange is they blame him for the release of documents that John Podesta had actually conspired to prevent Bernie Sanders from winning the election. They conspired improperly. They were leaders of the Democratic Party, and they basically rigged the election. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. They don't want to see that, and that's the reason that they're doing this thing. So this is why we're having the press conference today. And our first speaker is Naomi Hayase, and she's going to be talking about some of these issues.
Hi, here I would like to speak a little bit about his case and Julian Assange's plight for freedom. This has been the 7th year that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange spent Christmas in confinement inside Ecuador's London embassy. For nearly a decade, the US government's aggressive witch hunt of truth-tellers has trapped him in the UK. Assange claimed political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in 2012 to mitigate the risk of extradition to the US relating to his publishing activities. He has been unlawfully, by the UK government, without charge, being denied access to medical care, fresh air, sunlight, and adequate space to exercise. In December 2015, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention concluded that Assange was being arbitrarily deprived of his freedom and demanded that he be released. Yet the UK government's refusal to comply with the UN finding has allowed this unlawful detention to continue. At the end of March this year, one day after a high-level US military visit to Ecuador, Ecuador's new president, Lenín Moreno, cut off Assange from the outside world by denying his access to internet, prohibiting him having visitors and communicating with the press. Assange has been put into isolation, which Human Rights Watch General Counsel described as being similar to solitary confinement. In mid-October, in the guise of restoring his internet access, Ecuador issued a special protocol that perpetuates this silencing of Assange. By further restricting his freedom of expression and requiring him to pay for medical bills and phone calls, Moreno government seeks to break Assange. He's forcing him to leave the embassy on his own accord and get arrested by UK authorities who are refusing to give him assurance to not to extradite him to the US. Why did Assange, this Western journalist, become a target of this massive political retaliation? It is because he has engaged in real journalism to inform public about government war crimes and corruption. Last month, US prosecutors mistakenly revealed secret criminal charges against Assange under file in the Eastern District of Virginia. Although there is no clarity as to what charges are filed against Assange, it is said that alleged offenses include espionage. The US government has always had legal tools available to prosecute journalists, though they have never used them. Obama's Justice Department was eager to prosecute Assange and WikiLeaks for publishing classified information, but chose not to do so due to concerns that it would set a precedent that could strip away the First Amendment protection for the press. After WikiLeaks bought 7 publications in March 2017, detailing CIA capabilities to perform electronic surveillance, the US government showed their willingness to criminalize journalism. In April 2017, the then Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, stated that the arrest of Assange is a priority. The threat on press freedom increased in the following months as he showed his determination to prosecute media outlets publishing classified information. Trump's Secretary of State and the former CIA Director, Mike Pompeo, called WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service, claiming that the organization tried to subvert American ideals and it need to be shut down. As the Trump administration tried to claim that it has a right to prosecute anyone in the world in their assault on free press, top Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill showed their bipartisan support. They signed a letter demanding Pompeo to urge Ecuador to evict Assange. The charges against WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange are attack on freedom of the media everywhere. They mark a black day for journalism. Kenneth Roth, director of Human Rights Watch, noted, "It is deeply troubling if the Trump administration, which had shown little regard for media freedom, would charge Assange for receiving from a government official and publishing classified information, exactly what journalists do all the time." David Kane, UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression, stated that prosecuting Assange would be dangerously problematic from the perspective of free press freedom, and should be resisted. If Assange, a journalist, is being prosecuted by engaging in journalism, then what would stop the Trump government to go after all other media organizations, which include KPFA radio station? This is a slippery slope to preventing the media operating freely. I firmly believe it is of the best interest of the KPFA Berkeley station to show their support and make a strong public stance to defend Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
Good. Thank you, Nozomi. And the question we're raising here at the KPFA local station board meeting here in Berkeley on December the 29th is, why would this local station board majority try to delete a resolution calling for the freedom and defense of Julian Assange? This is especially the case since the Pacifica National Board has called for the defense and freedom of Julian Assange. Why would they take a different position? Well, some of them have argued, well, we shouldn't take a position as a radio station, a public radio station, on the case of Julian Assange. We shouldn't get involved. We can just put out information about Julian Assange. I don't buy that. Actually, we have to take a position because our own journalists at KPFA and Pacifica could be threatened and are threatened. Randy Credico, who is a whistleblower, has been forced to go to Congress to say that he's part of the leaks of the documents. So this issue of KPFA as some kind of neutral force that they can be neutral when the medium of the press is being attacked is outrageous, frankly. The other thing is the government, the Trump administration has called the journalists scum. And he's actually incited violence against journalists. Now, the answer to that is for the media and journalists to stand up and fight against these attacks, not to be silent and say we have to be neutral, we can't take a position on Julian Assange. I mean, this is a basically head in the sand method, and frankly, I think it is really a disgrace and an embarrassment to people that the KPFA would not take a clear stand to call for the defense and freedom of Julian Assange. The fact of the matter is that Pacifica would be the first network targeted. Would be the first network targeted if when they start arresting journalists, because they hate Pacifica, they hate KPFA, they hate the fact that there are independent voices, and we know, as a matter of fact, that these independent voices are going to be threatened. They want a controlled media. And the other thing that's going on in this country is the witch hunt against Russia. And that Julian Assange is now being accused of being an agent of Russia. Okay. Julian Assange is being accused of being an agent of Russia. The Russian phobia in this country is basically to divert people from the real issues. I mean, the real issues are the mass unemployment. The real issues are people not being able to survive, tents in the streets, people don't have housing in Berkeley, the speculators, the developers, the privatization being pushed by the Democrats and Republicans. Wars. I mean, $750 billion being spent on wars abroad with 800 bases. These are the real issues. Now, the real issue are those and not Julian Assange. But a lot of the media, unfortunately, including some in Pacifica, are saying, well, the Russians convinced African Americans to vote for Trump. Or this is what they're saying. I mean, it's a racist idea that a couple of Facebook postings can convince African Americans to vote for Trump. And this is what's being put out by the media. And frankly, that's really rebroadcast. And that agenda, that propaganda by the U.S. government is outrageous. And it has to do why some people don't want to defend Julian Assange. If you defend Julian Assange, oh, you're supporting the Russians. No, WikiLeaks is not an organ of the Russians. In fact, the hack at the Democratic Party headquarters was by an insider, somebody who worked there, and released it. It wasn't because the Russians went there. Furthermore, information of U.S. crimes that have gone on in Iraq and other countries. It's interesting that they want to prosecute Julian Assange, but the actual people who committed murders and crimes are not being prosecuted. What do we have? Julian Assange, who releases the information about U.S. crimes in Iraq, he's the one that's being prosecuted, and the people who did these crimes are not prosecuted. It's a double standard. I mean, what we demand is, in fact, that they prosecute the people who are committing war crimes. They prosecute these criminals in Iraq who committed war crimes. They prosecute, actually, Hillary Clinton for being involved in the overthrow of the Honduran government. That is a crime against the people of Honduras. When you talk about the migrants, the tens of thousands of people who've been forced out of Honduras as a result of that military coup and forced to the United States, they were forced out because of U.S. intervention in those countries. I mean, the economic crisis created by NAFTA and these economic trade agreements are privatizing and destroying the living conditions of people. That's what's brought migration, including in Iraq and the Middle East. The mass migration of millions of people, 6-7 million, the largest since the Second World War, has taken place because of the bombing of Iraq, the bombing of Syria, the bombing of Libya, which Obama and Clinton were involved in supporting. The destruction of these countries is a crime, is a war crime. We have no right, the United States has no right to be in Syria. It's an illegal war, it's an illegal intervention. That is a crime. I mean, imagine if Russia had invaded another country and bombed another country. People would be going crazy here. Attack Russia. Russia's a criminal country. Well, it's the United States that has troops in, or had troops in Syria. It's the United States that's bombing people all over Africa. It's not the Russians. But the propaganda in this country is to blame the Russians and to divert people from the real criminals. So we're here today to demand that KPFA local station board reverse itself and come clearly and forthrightly in defense of the freedom and defense of Julian Assange, that they agree with the Pacifica National Board, which voted 12-0, Pacifica National Board, to support the call for the defense of Julian Assange and the freedom of Julian Assange. And that is absolutely critical. And those people who did not want to support the defense and freedom of Julian Assange on this board, really, we have to question why they're on the board. Because if you can't defend the freedom of Julian Assange, why should you be on the KPFA local station board? That's a real question that we have to ask, and the people who are listeners and supporters of KPFA have to ask, especially since even the Pacifica National Board have already passed this resolution. Why? So maybe we'll have another speaker. Do you want to say something, Gwen?
Well, I just agree with everything you said, basically. If we don't support him, that means we support the lying press, which is the mainstream media, and they lie constantly. And so we're supporting that instead of KPFA, and then KPFA is going to be neutral? No, they got to tell the truth. Telling the truth is what you should be if you're a journalist. You shouldn't be mad at someone because they told the truth. That's basically how I feel.
And Stan, do you want to? No? Okay, so we're here again to defend Julian Assange and to call on the Pacifica local station board to reverse the decision they took not to call for the defense of freedom of Julian Assange. We're saying that has to be changed, that KPFA should be in the forefront of calling for the defense and freedom of Julian Assange. That is where KPFA should be, and that's why we're having this press conference here today at the KPFA local station board meeting. You can't hold your head up honestly and say that you defend Julian Assange and free speech rights for journalists and not publicly say he should be freed and the harassment against him, which has been going on for over 6 years, should end. He's been forced to stay in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and his internet has been cut off. Ecuador is being coerced by the U.S. government to force him out of the embassy. I mean, these are the methods of a U.S. imperial empire. They want to get their way no matter what. And frankly, KPFA, Pacifica have the responsibility of defending Julian Assange. That's our responsibility in Pacifica and KPFA. And they have to do the right thing. They have to defend Julian Assange. And failure to do that raises the question who you really represent. Who are you representing? That's what we say is critical. So, okay, thank you all. If you want to support us, this event has been called by the Bay Area Free Julian Assange Action Committee, and you can get us at Google Groups, where we have a Google group. Thank you.
Okay. Hi there. My name is Richard Stone, and I am a reporter for Julian Assange, and in that regard, I have actually represented the movement on two fronts. First, I work on the KPFA community advisory board, though I also help Steve form the Free Julian Assange working group and the subsequent resolution that was presented both to the KPFA and the Pacifica National Board, where it passed from the PNB, but an amended version was actually passed that wasn't what that people supporting Julian actually wanted, and in addition to that, I also am a delegate of the San Francisco Labor Council, and presented a very similar position that is a representative of labor's reasons why they should support, and that in itself also got temporarily tabled by some concerned members of the Labor Council. But we will be moving forward with that in January, or perhaps as late as February, in terms to pass the resolution as well. So I must say it's that a lot of people, though they really speak with a with a progressive tongue and wear a progressive hat, I think that that a lot more education and outreach needs to be done to make sure that that institutions like KPFA understand that even though they are broadcasting on certain shows. The plight of Julian Assange, that the broadcasting needs to be expanding to some of the other shows that have been reticent, and as well as the aforementioned movement with other movements like the like the labor movement. So I will keep on moving forward, and hope that we will not only pass this resolution, but just to get the any way possible to make sure that the plight of Assange will be a fruitful one, providing that he does get released and possibly extradited back here. So thank you for your time.
So let me ask you a question.
Yes.
How do you feel the existing board on KPFA reacted to Julian Assange even being brought up at the meeting?
Well, like I said, I think that I really do think that they need to actually face the issue with more of a sense of urgency. Like I said, it had that the issue of Julian Assange needs to be expanded, beyond the shows like Flashpoint, Flashpoints and the now defunct Guns and Butter show, amongst so the thing is, there are shows that have been carrying it all along, but the reason why the resolution was brought forth is to expand it to expand the cause to other shows other than what is considered the usual suspect or usual shows.
So let me ask you another question. I have to talk in the mic here. So what the board's reaction to Julian Assange and Pacifica taking a completely unanimous stand supporting Julian Assange, and this board apparently is going rogue from the Pacifica system. Do you have any thoughts on that?
My thoughts is to make sure that the candidates that are running in the current board are actually made aware of this, and once the election comes comes around, and we have our newly seated and appointed LSB members, that hopefully that with a new board that we will perhaps seek little or no resistance. That's what I'm hoping for, to concentrate on the newly elected members that'll be coming up in the current KPFA listener sponsor board election. Free Julian Assange.
Good point. Thank you, and have a wonderful day, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
We're here at the KPFA local board because the board rejected a resolution to call in defense of Julian Assange. At the board meeting today, a number of people in public comment, including Richard Stone, who's with the National Association of Letter Carriers, called on the board to change its position and actually call for the defense of Julian Assange and for his freedom. The board secretary, Carolyn, has denied that they're not defending Julian Assange. Carol Wolfley, and put out a flyer saying that they were defending Julian Assange, but they refused to call for his freedom and defense, as has the National Pacifica Board. called for the defense of Julian Assange and his freedom. So the rejection of this action of the board to frontally defend Julian Assange and call for his freedom has to be challenged by supporters of KPFA and other journalists, because journalists, KPFA and Pacifica, particularly KPFA, should be in the forefront of defending Julian Assange and other whistleblowers and journalists. And he is the one that is immediately facing threatened jail and capture by the United States government. So that's a critical issue, and something that we're going to continue to take up at KPFA and Pacifica. There are going to be elections for the KPFA, and I think that that election need to address where they stand on this resolution to Julian Assange.
Start marching with us! Start marching with us! Stop watching us! Start marching with us! Stop watching us! Start marching with us! Stop watching us! Start marching with 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 us! This is what a police state looks like! This is what a police state looks like!